Jordan, the character in Superman and Lois, compared to his brother Jonathan, has been receiving a lot of flack based on the comments I've read online, on YouTube that is, and I think unfairly so. If most viewers who've actually watched the series remembered how many times that Jordan actually looked out for his brother and actually protected him, I think most of the comments would not have been made. I think they were made prematurely so. So hey, let's have a look at that. Welcome to another episode of Many Moods of Maverick. I'm Ricky. Jordan's character has actually been like an introvert. Mostly indoors, he had probably had some form of inhibition within himself that actually prevented him from being more outgoing than his brother Jonathan. But then, after his powers manifested, we've seen many a times that he've actually protected his brother and looked out for his brother. Who remembered when they were out having that campfire? And I think there was someone beating up on Jonathan. Who actually uses heat vision, which actually was triggered right there and then in order to kind of get that person to back off. Who remembered when Jonathan and Candace was walking on that lonely road talking, and then Candace admitted that she actually loved Jonathan? Who remembered that guy who came out of the car and said, "Hey, Candace, get back into the vehicle," and then he ultimately inhaled some, I believe, ex-kryptonite stuff, and then started to beat up on Jonathan's character. Then Jordan came and rescued him. Do you remember when Jonathan looked at his brother before he left and went back to Sarah and said, "Hey, thank you"? Who was that actually introduced Jordan to a party where there was drinking, and Jordan is not the character that drinks or drank. So I'm looking at all of that. Who remembered the time when the Jonathan from the other world, I think his name was John L., came into the Superman and Lois world and started to take set on that Jonathan? Who was it that actually came in defense of that Jonathan? His twin brother Jordan. So I'm thinking and I'm looking back at it and I'm like, hey, you know what? I don't really think people should be commenting in a sense where they're just beating up on Jordan just like that. He has actually tried, based on him being the more powerful of the two at that time, to see how best he could protect the family, to see how he could actually help out his father in to get back his heart, to put it back in his body, to just see if he could get back his dad. Yeah, he was headstrong more than head and heart strong, or should I say he was probably heart strong instead of headstrong, because actually he never thought about what he was doing before he actually did it. And I remember that Jonathan was actually cautioning him, saying, "Hey, how is it that you just happen to hear our father's heartbeat all of a sudden right here and now, when Lex Luthor was actually gunning for all of us?" So Jonathan right there and then was thinking the smarter of the two. But then we remembered, I do, certainly of the history of the show, when there were times when Jonathan himself just wasn't thinking right, or he wasn't doing the right stuff, or when his brother Jordan turned up and protected him. But you know what I look at as funny though? The way how, you remember when even Jordan advised Jonathan against doping with ex-kryptonite. Did Jonathan listen? No, he continued until when his parents, Clark and Lois, found out, and they scolded him verbally for what he did and punished him. I think they reprimanded him inside the house. Who remembered that? So we need to remember all of these things before we get out and then we start, really going after Jordan and saying, "Hey, I prefer Jonathan because he's a calm of the two. He's always looking out and always giving advice and all of that." We need to equate the whole thing and look at both characters and remember that it was actually Jordan who man up of sorts many a times to protect his brother, as much as he gave some verbal advice to, albeit Jonathan portrayed his role without powers in giving his brother advice, helping him to calm down, to accept his powers, to manifest them. But we must always remember too that Jonathan was actually very jealous of his brother Jordan. The fact that both of them were twins, right? They're sons of Superman himself. And actually one ended up with his power manifesting and the other didn't. I knew it was going to happen at some point sooner or later. As a matter of fact, when I saw that in the basement when Jordan was trying to apologize to Jonathan for trying to do his best to see if he could save his dad, and then Jonathan started to lash out at him, I said to myself, this is where it's going to happen. And immediately as he sat down and he covered his face in his hands, I knew right there and then something was going to trigger, and that's exactly what happened. So I'm actually happy that it manifested that way. But then take a look at Jonathan's face After Jordan said to him, dude, you have powers. Take a look at his face when he was touching the spaceship, the ship that actually took Clark to Earth. Take a look at his face. Does that look like a pleased face, or didn't that look like a sinister face? In my personal opinion, his look was very sinister. Like he's saying, yeah, finally, nobody can say anything to me, right? So we need to look at that also. Two, you're gonna have two brothers, no matter whether or not they're twins, they're never going to be the same, right? And one thing I look at for sure is the way how it is alleged and seems very obvious and apparent to me that WB and DC have actually been distancing themselves from Zack Snyder. But then they seem to be incorporating all of Zack Snyder's style, the way how he filmed Man of Steel. They've been incorporating that into Superman and Lois. And hey, if you disbelieve me, why don't you take a look at the follow-up video? And then you'll see for yourself. So if we were to look at it in real life though, if Lois was to be the way how she did with both sons, when Lex Luthor, based on the digital device, presented her with the option of choosing between Jonathan and Jordan, and she ultimately, as the show went along, you discovered that she actually chose Jonathan. And her reason, right, as hurtful as it was to say it was because Jordan had power. That's what she told Jordan. So I guess, she expected him to really use his powers to defend himself, whereas Jonathan did not have any power, so he was the less vulnerable of the two. I can understand that explanation also, but in real life, even then, if I had a brother, same age, we were twins, I'm stronger or a little bit stronger than him, or I have some quality at that particular time that needed to present itself or that was wanted, and then I put it on display, and then he never had that quality, and then one of my parents made a choice and then probably chose him. Then, when you really look at it, it would have left a kind of emotional scar for life, because I think Lois had an option to just end the phone call. But then sometimes you're put in a precarious position where you just have to make a decision, and you may regret it later, but at the time it was just the most sensible decision that you could have made, right? So I'm looking at it though, and I'm saying to myself, all right, this is what happens in the show. It's a very emotional show, and it's funny how politics somewhere along the line seeps into the show, right? Because one of the things that I look at is to say, okay, so they weren't using supper time money to spend on Superman and Lois. They've actually been using big dinner time money to spend on Superman and Lois, and it's just a television show. Take a look at the action scenes. The action scenes have been epic, right? And I'm looking at it to say, hey, well, there are just so many scenes. There are a few scenes throughout the Superman and Lois series that has actually been comparable to Man of Steel. And I keep looking at it and I'm saying, why distance yourself from Zack Snyder if that is actually what the production houses, WBDC, if that was the script or screenwriters were doing. If that's what they were doing, why do it? And then at the same time, you're incorporating his style. The way how he did, look at the intensity of the heat vision. Look at, the way how he punches Doomsday, right? Everything I'm looking at it, but I'm saying it's like I'm watching the same Man of Steel, right? So it's not to say that one clash or fight scene with Doomsday and Superman for me was better than Man of Steel. No, it's not. Because in my own opinion, the Man of Steel action scenes were very epic and it involved the Trinity, right? And one thing I observe, Doomsday is supposed to have the same skin texture, the same skin of steel as Superman. But Wonder Woman managed to use the God Killer with, well, ultimately they say it was her who was the God Killer, but she used a sword to cut him on his leg. And I'm like, whoa, that gave me a thought or a thing or two. And I also remembered somewhere on the line, online, where I saw that Aquaman's trident can actually pierce Superman too, right? But none of those things were brought to fruition. It wasn't something that was actually needed. But I just look at some pretty interesting stuff and the amount of money that they actually spent on Superman versus Superman and Lois. So if they can spend that amount of money, if the screenwriters or the persons who prepare the script for Superman and Lois could do such a really good job, why is it that they can't do the same for their cinematic or their theatrical releases? I mean, when you take a look at some of their shows, that has actually appeared in theater, like I said, the problem that I have, all right, take a look at Shazam. It turned out to be a flop, but why did there have to be some element of the LGBTQ that appeared in Shazam? That wasn't needed, right? The same thing with the second Suicide Squad that came out. Why there had to be some element of the LGBTQ there? That wasn't needed either. And my advice to James Gunn, like I said, he was somewhere behind the second Suicide Squad, the one that featured John Cena. When that came out, he was somewhere. I'm trying to remember. I think he was one who either directed it or produced it. I'm gonna say I think he was one who directed it, but let's get back to that another time. But take a look at it. If I'm correct, the character of Polka Dot Man turned out to be, that kind of character. So I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, if he's going to be presenting the new Superman movie with characters that are going to be appearing as members of, or showing some LGBTQ kind of thing, then I'm thinking that he's going to be losing a lot of viewers right there. Persons would spread the word and say, hey, it's the same thing that DC has been doing with a lot of their television shows. This is what they presented into the Superman Legacy movie. And let's see how that will work out. I do wish him all the best. I'm certainly hoping that his take on Superman Legacy, the Superman movie, it will actually turn out well. I'm really looking forward to it. But going back to the whole Jonathan and Jordan kind of stuff, I'm also looking at it to say, how is it that they said various places online I've read where people were stating that Man of Steel was a little bit too violent and had too much explosion, but then all of a sudden it's been incorporated in Superman and Lois and nobody has a problem with that, right? I'm seeing where he's literally eating something with flesh. You remember in that basement scene when Lex Luthor and his, I don't know if it's his partner or his secretary. They were talking. They were in the head of the train. They were looking at Doomsday eating something, and he just took an organ and threw at them at the windshield, and it just stuck and then slid off. Was that a heart? From whatever he was eating, he took and threw it, and I was like, you see, so it has gore. It is violent. It's like the screenwriters or the scriptwriters decided to go all out with what they were projecting with Superman and Lois, right? And it's the same thing that, people are complaining based on Superman breaking General Zod's neck in the last part there of Man of Steel. Why? Do you remember Avengers Endgame? Wasn't it Captain America, the righteous Captain America, who was helping Thor to pull on Stormbreaker in order to decapitate Thanos? How many people have actually remembered that? Do you remember in the first part of Endgame that it was Thor when they went to where that version of Thanos was? Thor took off his head without question, but nobody had a problem with that. I just can't get that. It's like it's kind of political, that's actually seeped into these movies based on reviews, based on people's commentary, etc. And I think people need to be more fair. All right. So, like I said, I'm wishing the DC Extended Universe, both theatrical releases and whatever comes on TV, all the best. But I'm certainly hoping it will be something worthwhile watching. Something, they complain of DC being dark. Gotham was really good. It was well written, right? And I'm looking at it to say, okay, so what? Are we to have a comedy DC Extended Universe like how Marvel was filled with a lot of comedy? I mean, we don't really need that. All right, if one is comedy, allow one to be dark. Like I've stated from before, and if you guys could go ahead and check all my videos that I actually posted based on Marvel versus DC versus Marvel, and the reason why Marvel has been so successful and DC hasn't been. I've explained that extensively in my previous videos. You can go ahead, look up those videos and check it out and leave your comments and tell me if you agree or not. But I actually explain why it was so. So I'm thinking that if anything, they should actually try their very best and see how they can actually have some of the darkness in the DC extended universe, have some of the darkness going in their theatrical releases, in their television shows. As a matter of fact, they can actually keep the level of darkness that they have in it or they had in those movies, keep it going in their future movies. And then if they want to incorporate some humor in it, they can actually do so. Like I've stated before, the biggest mistake that DC actually made started with those who were greedy. All right. When Man of Steel, which was the primary release for the DC universe, did so well, it never made $1 billion, and that was fine. I mean, I actually thought that the audience, the movie going audience, just suffered from a Superman fatigue because it was only a few short years before that where you had Superman Return with Brandon Ruth. All right. And then right after that, you had Man of Steel, which was a complete reshaping of the Superman character in a sense, different actor, different scenes, intense action. It was excellent as far as I'm concerned. All right. And then right after that, then we had some follow-up ones, the Suicide Squad. We had, and then Batman versus Superman came out, which was, as far as I'm concerned, a very good movie. The only thing polarizing in a sense about it was just the appearance of Ben Affleck as Batman. I don't think many people were satisfied with that, especially with the memory of him as far as his portrayal of Daredevil was concerned. People never enjoyed that much. I didn't really enjoy it that much. It's not to say the subsequent movies he starred after, weren't good. They were good. The Town, Argo, and all of those. So those were good too. It's just, I think the casting choice, it was a mistake when they casted Ben Affleck to star as Batman. You needed somebody also, I believe, who was pretty good in martial arts, and I think Scott Adkins would have been a better Batman than having Ben Affleck in that role. All right, that's my personal opinion. You guys can tell me whether or not you agree. All right, but I'm just looking at it to say, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that went on. People can comment about Jordan versus Jonathan as much as they want. I'm gonna catch the other episode as soon as I possibly can, but I just think people need to just calm down a bit. People just need to look at the thing on a whole. It's not to say they shouldn't be hating on Jordan's character as they've been doing. They shouldn't be, and love both. Both have their faults. Both have their flaws. Now both of them have powers. Let's see how that power dynamic will work out. Let's see who, if there will be constant fights between the two, which would be absolutely unnecessary. But I'm guessing people are anticipating that there will be a fight between the two. I'm not expecting any one of them to win. Jordan also has experience of being a superhero. Jonathan doesn't. He's just being introduced to all of this, but then based on all the pent-up stuff that he had inside, who knows if he'll make the wrong move? Who knows if he'll do the wrong thing? Because like I said, based on what I've seen throughout the series with him, he's been very jealous of his brother. All right? He not having powers and his brother having powers. All right? But then the thing about Jordan is just that he was just too itchy to go ahead and do something that he was not prepared for. And that I think a lot of people who view the series did not like. All right, so both have their flaws. And I'm thinking both of them are sitting back, in their seat and just looking and saying, yeah, a lot of these comments that people have passed on both characters have been worthwhile. But it just took one episode for people just to be beating up on Jordan like that. No, I don't think that is absolutely necessary. Remember what he did for his brother. He's actually been there for his brother, and not only his brother, his father, and his mother too, as well as other people, including Sarah. All right, so I think we should all look at that and then see how, if you could come to a better conclusion. But then, hey, if everybody is of their opinion and they want to keep it that, they like Jonathan more than Jordan, and then a few will come and say, hey, I like Jordan more, or whichever way. If it's 50-50, hey, it's just people's personal opinion, but I thought it was something worthwhile to mention. I thought it was something to really, shell out and look at the whole, all the pieces and then bring them together so people can actually look and say, hey, you know what? This is actually a pretty conscious analysis of the whole thing. But then, hey, it's been a pretty good series. I think that DC and Warner Brothers have been, putting everything into the show just, because it's a final season. And then we'll see how it works out. But then, like I said, I think they probably should have ended the series from before, because they're going to be having as time goes along, a third Doomsday character being introduced. Because, of course, I oftentimes wonder who's more powerful, Doomsday or Darkseid? All right, because you've heard of Doomsday and well, not Doomsday, but Superman going up against Darkseid, and I think at one point he broke Darkseid's shoulder. All right, but when you really check it out, in both fights, Man of Steel and Superman and Lois, when Superman went up against Doomsday, he never won. All right, he had to find an alternate means of actually defeating his foe. So, I mean, ultimately he won, with the help of, Batman and Wonder Woman in Man of Steel. And this time around, well, let's see how it will go when he takes on Doomsday. All right, like I said, I haven't caught that episode. I'm not sure. I think that's episode 4 or episode 3. I haven't seen it as yet, but I'll ultimately see it and then, come to my own conclusion. But guys, hey, tell you what, I'm looking forward to greater things from the DC universe. I'm certainly hoping. It's kind of funny. The DC universe started off officially in 2013, if memory serves me right, in Man of Steel. And to say they're so late now to be starting off in what? Pretty much 2025? I guess you can call it that because we can't look at The Flash, which was released when? Was it sometime early this year in 2023? And that was a dismal failure. And, next time they're doing their casting of any character to portray in the DC Extended Universe, we need to make sure that a man acts like a man and a woman acts like a woman, the way they are to be. Read into that the way you want to, if you must, but I'm guessing after you look at all their shows and you see what's going on and the way the characters were portrayed, I'm certain people come to their own conclusion. So guys, I went ahead and I made a mashup video of sorts featuring the fight between Superman and Doomsday, both in Man of Steel, and Superman and Lois. And despite what I've read online, various sections online, that DC and Warner Brothers has actually been distancing themselves from Zack Snyder, it makes me wonder how that is so, and then at the same time they've managed to incorporate his visuals, his style of shooting the video in Man of Steel into Superman and Lois, and then at the same time, it's pretty much a high comparison. I've made a video, I've posted it. Hey, you guys, tell me what you think and leave it in the comment section. All right, so guys, leave your comments, let me know what you think. Press that subscribe button. Keep watching, keep tuning in, check out all my videos that I posted before. Tell your friends and family about Many Moods of Maverick, featuring myself, Ricky the Maverick. And hey, until the next one, I look forward to catching up with you guys. All right, take care. God bless.